The first time Commander Ryland heard the word betrayal wasn't from a politician or a rebel. It was from his father, drunk, bleeding, and gripping a cracked hollow of Earth's skyline before the orbital fires. "Never trust those who smile when they send you to die," he had mumbled, blood leaking from a gash above his eye. That was years ago. Ryland never forgot it. Now he stood in front of what used to be the Earth High Command Station, or what was left of it, floating in orbit above the planet that was no longer blue but a dull gray, suffocated by fallout clouds and shredded ozone. The Council hadn't sent help, not when the alien dust storms swept through cities like blades, not when food riots ripped through the streets, and definitely not when Earth cried for backup after the Krell launched their second wave. Humanity screamed. The Council watched. And then they closed the gates, locked Earth out of the system and labeled it unsalvageable, a word Ryland would choke on for the rest of his life. They were supposed to be allies, a union of species, but the Council had already decided. Earth was too dangerous, too volatile, too human. So we left. Not in peace, not in shame, but with clenched fists, stolen tech, and hearts full of fury. Ryland led the last exodus, Operation Emberglass. They boarded retrofitted colony haulers, stole wormhole drives from old Council frigates, and burned their way through blockade zones. He still remembered the face of the Council envoy when Ryland pulled a gun on him and said, "Earth doesn't beg, Earth takes." It's been 4 years since then. Humanity didn't just survive, they evolved, not biologically, not through tech, through hatred, through exile, through the kind of pressure that either crushes bones or turns them into weapons. They settled on Arcadia 3, a fringe world deep in uncharted space. Gravity was heavier. Air felt like ash for the first few weeks. But it was ours. No alien rules, no syndicates, no goddamn council. And then, things started breaking. Time slipped. Clocks desynced. Pilots reported returning from scouting missions hours before they left. Some saw stars blink out, not die, blink, like someone had flipped a switch on the cosmos. And the worst of it? Ryland's dreams. He saw Earth, but not the one they left. It was wrong, tilted, twisting, like reality had splintered. The oceans hung above the sky, cities looped infinitely into themselves. And the people weren't people anymore. Their eyes were mirrors. He tried to dismiss it. PTSD, neural stress from the wormhole tech. But the reports kept piling up. Civilians vanishing mid-step, ships returning with crews inverted, organs outside their bodies, whispering words no human ever spoke. Then came the message. No origin signature, just static. Then a woman's voice. "You left the anchor?" No name, no coordinates, just those 4 words, looping. Ryland brought the message to his team. Old war dogs, not council puppets. Men who'd fought in the Europa sieges, who'd watched cities drown in silence because no one came. And they all knew the same thing. Something had snapped. Earth wasn't just abandoned, it was holding reality together. Somehow, by some accident of physics or fate, that planet had been an anchor point. The center of a chain that kept the galaxy's logic intact. Time, space, existence. And when the Council pulled away, when we pulled away, we broke it. Ryland stared out the viewport now, watching a distant star flicker like a dying bulb. A star that shouldn't be flickering. There were rules once, rules the universe followed. Now? Now those rules bled. He turned to his crew, hard faces, eyes that had seen what silence could do. No one spoke, but they all understood what came next. "We're going back," Ryland said. "Not for the Council, not for revenge." He leaned forward, voice low. We're going back to fix what they broke, because if we don't, reality's gonna come looking for us next. Ryland didn't sleep much after he made the decision. Not that he could. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Earth, but not as it was. Not anymore. One night, he saw the continents floating like islands in the sky, people walking upside down across the clouds while skyscrapers burned in reverse, flames freezing mid-air and drifting upward like snowflakes. In another dream, the moon blinked and the oceans rose like hands reaching up to drag down the stars. And every dream ended the same way. He stood in the ruins of the old UN headquarters, his father's voice whispering behind him. "You left the anchor." When he woke up, the bedsheets were soaked with sweat, his hands were shaking. He wasn't alone. At least a third of the crew had started reporting the same nightmares, different images, but always Earth. Always wrong. Neural drift, Dr. Velm suggested at first. She was the lead neurospecialist on the Iron Wraith, the flagship of the Arcadian fleet. But even she started losing confidence in her own diagnosis after what happened in Sector 7. They lost the Brindle Hawk, one of their faster recon vessels. No explosion, no warning, just gone. The beacon vanished from the board, like someone had wiped its coordinates from reality. For 3 hours they tried to ping it back. Then, without explanation, it returned. But it wasn't the same. The ship was covered in some sort of dark, fibrous growth, like veins of shadow crawling along its hull. The crew were different. Their voices overlapped. Words came out of sync with their mouths. Their pupils pulsed, expanding and contracting as if listening to some unheard frequency. Ryland ordered the ship locked down. 2 of his officers went aboard to retrieve flight logs. Neither returned. When Ryland authorized a drone to breach the Brindle Hawk, all it showed was footage of empty halls and flickering lights until it reached the bridge. There, it froze. Just before the feed cut off, the drone caught a single frame of the crew standing side by side, perfectly still, staring at the camera with those hollow black eyes, smiling. Dr. Velm quit 2 days later, took her own life in the medbay. She left a note. We never should have left. It was never about the Council. Earth was the only thing keeping us sane. That was the last straw. Ryland called a full assembly. Pilots, techs, engineers, tacticians, everyone. The ship's main hangar echoed with tension as he stepped onto the command platform, his voice cutting through the murmurs. This isn't just decay. It's not neural feedback or malfunction. The universe is breaking, and we're at the epicenter. He held up the recording from the Brindle Hawk, froze it on the image of the crew's faces. This is what happens when you remove a keystone from an arch. Earth wasn't just where we lived. It was the lock, the foundation. We pulled it out, and now the laws of space, time, maybe even identity itself are starting to come apart. Someone shouted, "You want to go back there?" To that place? Ryland nodded once. Yeah, I do. Silence stretched across the hangar like a loaded weapon. We go back to Earth. We study the fracture point. If there's a way to fix this, it's there. A low murmur spread. Some heads nodded. Others looked ready to mutiny. But no one stepped forward to challenge him. Not yet. The journey back was faster than their exodus. Ryland had been preparing for months in secret, charting the warped paths through the broken sectors. The closer they got to Sool, the worse things became. Planets changed orbit mid-scan. Beacons recorded events that hadn't happened yet. One ship in their convoy received a distress signal from itself, time-stamped a week into the future. And then came the creatures. They weren't ships, not really. More like shapes, Long, jagged things that twisted through the void like smoke and metal. They weren't organic, but they moved with purpose, as if they knew. One scout got too close. Ryland watched from the bridge as the shape hovered near the hull, unmoving. Then, without touching the ship, it unwound it. The hull peeled like paper, folding in on itself until the ship collapsed into a knot of debris and silence. He gave the order. No one approaches the anomalies, not unless they wanted to be erased from history. As they neared the system's outer rim, strange pulses began to echo through the comms. Not messages, not signals, just static. But it felt alive. Sometimes it mimicked crew voices. Sometimes it repeated their thoughts before they spoke them. And once, it laughed. Ryland spent his nights poring over Earth's last telemetry before the shutout. There were seismic spikes, not from weapons, but from within. Energy readings that didn't match anything in the Council's database. Like Earth had ignited something, not a weapon, a response. And now it was calling them back. 3 weeks into the return voyage, Ryland met with Colonel Shar, head of fleet security. "I've got 5 men under lockup," Shar said. "They tried to sabotage the drive course, said we were walking into a trap." Ryland didn't flinch. How did they know the core coordinates? Shar hesitated. "That's the thing. We wiped those logs from public access weeks ago." "Internal leak?" "I thought so. But all 5 gave different stories. Said the information came to them in dreams." Ryland exhaled slowly. The noose was tightening. "We're fracturing," he muttered. Shar nodded grimly. Some faster than others. That night, Ryland stood alone in the observation deck. The stars ahead were no longer fixed. They twisted in spirals and fractals, stretching toward a black dot in the distance. Earth. Except it wasn't Earth. Not anymore. It shimmered like a memory behind a veil, its surface pulsing faintly, covered in lines, almost like scars, etched into the planet's crust. Great rifts circled the globe, glowing with dim, sickly light. As if the planet had become aware. He reached out toward the glass, whispering, "What did they do to you?" As if in answer, the static returned. Only this time, it formed words. "You are not who you were. Return, or be undone." The final jump came 2 days later. The fleet assembled at the edge of Sol's gravity well, engines humming low like a heartbeat. Ryland gave the final speech from the bridge. "We came to this place to survive, to escape betrayal, but we brought our wounds with us. And now we see that survival isn't enough, because the universe remembers, and it's unraveling." He looked into the camera, broadcasting to every soul aboard the fleet. "We go back not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the only species stubborn enough to fix the very thing we broke. Earth was never just home. It was the anchor of us all." He gave the signal. The jump initiated. The stars folded inward. The ship shook, alarms flared, and then... silence. They were there. Sool. But not as they knew it. The sun pulsed, flickering between blue and red. The planets hung like broken toys, out of orbit, some floating sideways, some cracking at their cores. Earth. Earth was both there and not. It existed in layers, like images superimposed. One version was burning, one was frozen, one was alive, a jungle of spires and light, all overlapped, all real. Time didn't flow forward here. It pulsed, like breath. And from orbit, Ryland could see something no one expected. A signal beacon. Still transmitting. From the surface, active, ancient tech, human design. But the signature? It was Ryland's own, 35 years old. From before he was born, Ryland didn't speak for nearly an hour after the fleet completed the final jump. No one did. The bridge of the Iron Wraith was deathly quiet, every crew member glued to their screens, trying to process what they were seeing. Earth spun slowly before them, or rather, Earths. The planet existed in overlapping layers, all ghosting into one another like transparencies. One burned, one froze, one was covered in spires that blinked like living organisms, another was void. No life, no atmosphere, just black rock and bone-white oceans. Ryland sat forward, jaw tight. Give me a clean read. Lieutenant Brax, the ship's sensor chief, shook his head. There is no clean read, Commander. We're picking up quantum phase echoes, overlapping gravities, fractured timelines. We're seeing all versions of Earth simultaneously. Which one's real? Brax hesitated. I don't think that word means anything here anymore, sir. The static on the comms returned. Ryland turned toward the main console. The beacon signal, the one that bore his name, pulsed steadily. Its coordinates matched a location in what used to be southern France, a place that hadn't existed for nearly 35 years. I'm going down, Ryland said. Prep the Raven drop. I want full recon, no AI nav, manual flight only. Colonel Shar narrowed his eyes. Sir, I can't allow you to... Then put me in chains, Shar. But we came this far because I led us. If we're going to understand what happened to Earth, I'm not trusting it to drones in theory. Shar didn't argue again. The drop through Earth's atmosphere felt like diving into glass. The shuttle rattled, groaned, then trembled so violently Ryland thought they were being pulled apart. But then the storm cleared, and what lay beneath took his breath away. The landscape was a fusion of nightmares and beauty. Trees hung from the sky, their roots suspended in gravity-defying strands of soil. Rivers ran uphill, mountains drifted like clouds, and across it all, ghost cities shimmered and faded, as if time itself was trying to remember what belonged where. The beacon led them to the outskirts of what should have been Marseille. Only it wasn't a city anymore. It was a crater, surrounded by jagged spires of silver stone that pulsed faintly, like veins in a living organism. At the center stood a tower, worn, blackened by fire, human-made, rusted steel, exposed wiring, patches of moss growing in cracks. The old UN beacon tower. How is this thing transmitting? Asked Corporal Nera, his voice echoing through the static-filtered comms. Ryland didn't answer. He just stepped out of the shuttle, boots crunching over broken glass and fractured asphalt. The air was breathable but thick, like walking through water. His heartbeat slowed unnaturally, then picked up again as they crossed the crater's rim. The tower loomed ahead, surrounded by silence. Then a voice spoke. His voice. Access granted. Welcome home, Commander Ryland. He froze. The others raised weapons instantly. That recording was never made, Ryland said. I've never been here before. But the tower thought otherwise. Inside, it was worse. The walls were covered in photographs, some decades old, some impossibly new. Some showed Ryland as a child, standing in front of a house that no longer existed. Others showed him as he looked now, gray-eyed, scarred, standing beside people he had never met. What the hell is this place? Nere whispered. The further they walked, the deeper the unease grew. The lights flickered with their memories. Ryland touched a console, and it lit up with data logs titled under Commander Ryland, Year 12, Version 6. Another folder read, Ryland Prime, Emotional Drift Report. He opened the file. Emotional drift increasing. Ryland Prime is beginning to question reality layers. Temporal sync is failing. Identity overlaps are at 63%. Recommendation: terminate extraneous versions before convergence. He stepped back, stomach churning. This isn't just a tower, it's a mirror, he muttered, of what we were, or maybe what we're becoming. That's when they heard the scream. It didn't come from outside. It came from the basement. Ryland and Nere rushed down the rusted stairs, weapons drawn. The scream came again, human, male, hoarse from exhaustion. They reached a reinforced door marked in old UN military code. Quarantine, level 3. "Override it," Ryland ordered. The door hissed open, and inside, shackled to the floor, was himself. Same face, same building, but thinner, gaunt, eyes wild with fear. The man looked up and croaked, "Took you long enough." Nere raised his weapon, panicked. "Commander, what?" "I don't know," Ryland said, shaking. "The prisoner." Ryland laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think you're the first? They always come back, always asking the same questions." Ryland stepped forward. "What is this place?" The other Ryland spat blood. "A loop, a trial, a punishment, take your pick. We broke the spine of reality when we left Earth. The Council didn't just abandon us, they knew." "Knew what?" "That Earth was holding it all together," the prisoner said. "A frequency, a pulse. It kept the timelines clean. When we left, it cracked. When they sealed the gates, it shattered." Ryland stared, stunned. "You're me?" The prisoner nodded. "I was, until I stayed behind. The tower kept me. Said I was necessary, a piece of the loop." "Why are we looping?" The prisoner's expression darkened. "Because the Council made a deal, not with aliens, not with other species, with the void between reality, with what comes after." Nere whispered, "That's not possible." "Nothing is impossible here," the prisoner growled. "Reality is bleeding, and it's feeding on us. Every time a version of you comes back, they get closer. They want your mind, your choices, until one of you breaks the cycle." Ryland backed away. "This is madness." The prisoner smiled. "It always is. Right before you shoot me." "What?" He nodded at Ryland's weapon. "It's how the next version begins. You kill me, then you become me, you stay here, until the next Ryland arrives, until the next team lands." Nere's hands trembled. "Commander, what if he's right?" Ryland looked at the man who wore his face, and saw the exhaustion, the years, the truth in his madness. "I'm not staying here," he said firmly. "I said that too," the prisoner whispered. Then something above them shifted. The tower moaned, yes, moaned, like something alive. The walls pulsed with light, and suddenly, the photos on the walls began to change. Each one showed Ryland, older, broken, mutated, eaten by shadows. "We have to leave," Ryland said, but the prisoner lunged, chains screeching. "Don't leave me here again!" Gunfire erupted. Nere fired first. The prisoner fell, chest smoking, whispering, "It just begins again." They returned to the shuttle in silence. No one spoke on the way up. But Ryland felt it. Something followed them. Not a creature, not a signal, a version of himself, embedded in his memory, in his timeline, a crack that was now inside him. Back aboard the Iron Wraith, Ryland sealed himself in the debriefing room. He watched the feed from the tower, rewound the beacon logs, checked every transmission, and found one final file, dated for tomorrow. Incoming entry log, Commander Ryland, Year 4, Loop 5. If you're watching this, then it didn't work. You found the tower, You killed the version of yourself trapped there, and now the loop resets. Reality continues to fracture. Earth is not a place anymore. It's a wound, and we're the infection. The council thought they could cut the infection off, but Earth wasn't infected. We were. Ryland sat in the debrief chamber alone, the dim blue light of the holoscreens flickering across his face. The message still played on loop. Earth is not a place anymore. It's a wound, and we're the infection. It repeated again and again, like a ritual he was being forced to memorize. The man in the video looked just like him, but with sunken cheeks and eyes that had seen too many endings. Loop 5, he called it. Ryland didn't want to ask the question, but it rang in his skull regardless. What loop am I in now? He hadn't told the crew everything. Not about the prisoner, not about the alternate versions of himself, or the logs predicting his choices. If word got out, panic would tear the fleet apart before they even understood what they were fighting. The beacon tower was still transmitting, sending distorted data bursts to every system on the ship. Blueprints of structures no one had built, coordinates to star systems that didn't exist. Even the AI units aboard the Iron Wraith began malfunctioning, their responses merging with Council-standard encryption codes long abandoned when Earth was sealed off. Ryland issued an immediate command. Disable all AI across the fleet. No exceptions. Full shutdown. His officers didn't argue. Not after seeing the faces on the Brindlehawk. Not after seeing the warped Earth. Back on the bridge, Shar approached with something grimmer than usual. The colonel rarely showed fear. But today, his hand trembled as he handed over a secured data cube. We decrypted part of the Council's long-range archive, he said. This wasn't supposed to be public, even among their upper ranks. Ryland inserted the cube into the main console. A single video loaded. Council chamber. Year 2298. 2 years before Earth was declared unsalvageable. The Council Chancellor stood in front of a table of nervous delegates, his voice cold and deliberate. The quantum fractures have accelerated. Earth's atmosphere is no longer a physical boundary. It's becoming a frequency hub. Every time its mass receives enough emotional trauma, the timelines warp. The humans have created a planet so charged with psychic weight that it's begun affecting the architecture of reality itself. If they stay, the instability spreads. If they die, the wave triggers full breakdown. The only solution is to exile them. Cut the anchor. Let Earth become what it must. Let them drift. Contained another voice, female and hesitant, asked, "What if they come back?" The Chancellor looked straight into the camera. "Then may the universe forgive us, because Earth will not." The screen went black. Ryland felt the cold crawl into his bones. "This was never about military support," he muttered. "They didn't leave us to die because we were weak. They abandoned us because we were dangerous." Shar exhaled sharply. "We're not the broken ones. We're the threat." "No," Ryland said. "We're the center." He turned to his officers. "Tell the fleet to prep. I want encrypted comms only. We leave orbit in 6 hours, before this planet finds a way to pull us in." "Where are we going?" "To the Ark." The room stiffened. The Ark was humanity's last off-world Council-sanctioned data fortress, hidden in the Veil sector, thought to be abandoned after Earth's fall. No one had spoken its name in years. Shar narrowed his eyes. "You think they kept a copy of the deal?" "I think the Council was scared enough to record everything, including whatever they really traded Earth for. The journey to the Ark was chaos. Space was no longer stable. Wormholes cracked mid-jump, scattering fleets into different time streams. Some ships vanished completely, only to reappear hours later, covered in frost and radio silence. One came back split in half. The bodies of its crew burned from the inside out, mouths stretched in eternal screams. Still, Ryland pressed on. The Iron Wraith reached the Vale sector with only 3 escort ships still functional. The Ark's signal was faint, shielded beneath a collapsing nebula. They cut through layers of dust storms and radiation clouds, finally emerging before a structure that defied logic. The Ark wasn't a station. It was a cube, perfect, seamless, the size of a small moon, floating still against the swirl of dying stars. Its surface shimmered like oil in water, and its outer hull had no ports, no windows, just one pulsing symbol. The old Earth flag, flickering between black and silver. No one spoke. Ryland gave the order. "Dock us." Inside, the Ark was colder than deep space. Every corridor was lined with dormant council drones, not military bots, but observation units. Their heads turned as Ryland walked past, though none moved. Just watched. The main chamber looked like a cathedral. Giant spires of black glass rose around a central pillar that held a sphere of white light, flickering faintly. The Ark's core. Nearer ran scans. "It's made of human memory." Ryland frowned. "What?" She tapped her console again. "These aren't electrical signals. They're emotional resonance. The core is literally powered by Earth's collective psychic output. It runs on memory, grief, rage. Us," Ryland finished. He stepped toward the core, and the sphere changed. It showed Earth. Not as it is now, but as it was. Blue, vibrant. Then it shifted. Fires, floods, wars, exoduses, and finally, Ryland himself, as a boy, watching ships flee from burning cities. A voice filled the chamber. "Welcome, Ryland." It was the Ark. Not a machine, not an AI. A hive of memory. "You have come full circle. You carry the fracture inside you." He asked quietly, "How do we fix it?" The Ark pulsed. "You cannot." The moment Earth was abandoned, the keystone broke. Reality began unmaking itself. But you can choose how it ends. Rejoin the Council. Offer yourselves. The memory core will stabilize, at the cost of your species. Or, you sever the last link, let Earth collapse into the void, and preserve what remains of the stars. Shar cursed under his breath. They knew this all along. Ryland turned away from the core, fists clenched. They traded us like infected cattle. "They traded us like fuel," Neri corrected. The sphere flickered again, showing alternate Rylands, hundreds of them, some young, some old, all walking the same path, some crying, some killing, all ending up in the same room. "This is the loop," Ryland whispered. "They programmed it into the Ark, into Earth. We're not meant to survive." Shar approached him. "What do we do?" Ryland turned toward his team. The weight of it all rested on his shoulders. "This loop ends with me." That night, Ryland returned to his quarters. He stared out at the stars and didn't sleep. Instead, he wrote a message. "To whoever finds this, my name is Ryland. I was commander of the Iron Wraith. I brought humanity home. Earth is not a planet anymore. It is a reckoning, and I am its echo." He sent the message into deep space, beyond council reach, beyond time. Then he gave his final order. "Prepare to descend. We're going back to Earth." The shuttle ride down was nothing like the first. This time, Earth didn't resist them. It welcomed them. And that was more terrifying than any storm or gravitational anomaly Ryland had ever faced. Clouds parted for their descent like torn fabric. The atmosphere didn't burn. It shimmered. Space around the Raven Drop bent in slight curves, barely noticeable, as if the planet were adjusting its surface to accommodate them. "Sir," Corporal Nere whispered from the co-pilot's chair, "we've lost all sense of altitude. Our instruments are looping." Ryland glanced at the nav screen. The altitude meter ticked down to 0, then restarted at 20,000 again. Gravity fluctuated in strange pulses, making their bones feel light, then suddenly twice as heavy. The closer they got, the more the world below seemed to rewrite itself. This was no longer Earth. It hadn't been for a long time. They were descending into the wound. The shuttle landed not far from where the first beacon had been found, but now the land had reshaped. The crater was gone. In its place stood a massive spiral tower, a grotesque mockery of the original beacon, 10 times taller, built from thousands of melted metal scraps, bones, council alloy, and fragments of human tech. It pulsed like a heart. The ground around it rippled like water, shimmering with fractured reflections of the team as they stepped onto it. For a moment, Ryland saw multiple versions of himself reflected in the ground, some bleeding, some younger, some smiling like they knew what was about to happen. Shar muttered behind him, "We shouldn't be here." "I agree," Ryland said quietly. "But we're the ones who have to be." A new voice echoed around them, not over the comms, not from the tower, but from inside their minds. "You've brought them far, Ryland, farther than any other version. You must be proud." Ryland froze. "Who's speaking?" The tower pulsed again. The ground quaked. Then, from the base of the spiral, a figure emerged. Not a monster, not an alien, a man. Ryland's jaw clenched the moment he recognized him. It was himself, again, but not a prisoner, not a broken echo. This one stood tall, serene, dressed in black armor traced with gold veins, eyes glowing faintly, like the stars themselves had burned into his irises. "Commander Ryland," he said calmly. "I'm the first, the one who stayed, the one who became." The team raised weapons, but the first, Ryland, didn't flinch. "I've waited for you, because you are the last." Ryland stepped forward slowly. "If you're me, then you know why I'm here." "I do," the first Ryland replied, "but you're here too late." He led them into the tower, which wasn't made of metal or stone. It was built from moments. Every wall they passed shimmered with memories. Ryland saw himself holding his mother's hand as she died in the evacuation tunnels. Saw his father argue with council officers during the last vote to abandon Earth. Saw the fleet launch into exile. Each step forward was a step backward in time. The first Ryland explained as they climbed. "This is the epicenter, the convergence of all Earths, all Rylands. When the Council betrayed Earth, they didn't just abandon a planet, they severed a node from the great neural web of the universe. Earth wasn't just alive, it was aware, and when it felt betrayal, it responded." Ryland frowned. "Responded how?" "By creating us," First Ryland said, smiling thinly. "Or rather, by copying us, again and again, until it found the one that would make the right choice." "You mean the loop?" "Yes," First Ryland said. "The tower is a wound, but we are its immune response." Nere whispered, "You're saying this is all intentional?" "Earth evolved," First Ryland said simply. "Not in biology, in consciousness. Betrayal triggered awakening. Exile triggered infection. Now we are the bacteria trying to explain to the host that we're not the disease." They reached the summit. The room was spherical, silent. At its center floated a pulsing orb, not unlike the Ark's core, but this one was brighter, louder, throbbing with the sound of a heartbeat that wasn't human. "This is the anchor," First Ryland said. "It's what's left of Earth's original self. If you touch it, you will see everything." Ryland stepped forward. "What happens if I destroy it?" "You collapse all loops. Everything resets. Maybe it heals. Maybe it ends. No one knows. No one's ever tried." "And if I fuse with it?" "You stabilize the loop," First Ryland said. You become Earth's mind. You guide what comes next. But you stop being you. Nere stepped forward, eyes wide. Commander, don't! Ryland turned. I have to. There's no victory here. There's only choice. First, Ryland walked toward him slowly. I chose to stay. To protect the anchor. But you're not like me? I know. Because every version of you that touched this, they killed me before they did. Ryland raised his weapon, but he didn't fire. Instead, he said, If we're really the same, then you know I never wanted to win. I just didn't want to run. The first Ryland smiled. Then maybe you're the one. He stepped aside. Ryland reached forward, his hand trembling, and placed it against the anchor. It was like falling. Through space. Through time. Through memory. He saw every loop. Every version. Each one worse than the last. A Ryland who sacrificed the fleet to save Earth. A Ryland who let Earth collapse to protect the stars. A Ryland who fused with the Council. One who destroyed himself. One who became God. One who became nothing. The pain was unbearable. But at the core of it, there was a choice. A fork. Two paths. One where Earth dies and the universe lives. One where Earth evolves, but reality fractures forever. Ryland stood between them and chose a third. He opened his eyes. He was no longer in the tower. He was on Earth. But it was whole again. Sky blue, oceans calm, cities unruined. He stood in the middle of the old capital, Geneva, now reborn, alive. Children ran through the streets. Ships soared overhead. The air hummed with energy, not fear, not decay, but hope. Beside him stood Shar and Nere. Sir, Nere asked, confused, how did we— We made a new loop, Ryland said, but it feels real. It is, Ryland answered. I didn't destroy the anchor. I didn't fuse with it. I gave it a new shape. He looked up at the sky. Humanity isn't the infection. It's the consciousness Earth needed to survive. Will the Council come? Shar asked. They already did, Ryland said, and now they answer to us. He looked down at his hand. The same scar, the same blood, but no longer fractured, no longer repeating. This was now. And now was enough. 3 days after the Reformation, the sky changed. Ryland noticed it first during his morning walk through what used to be the wreckage of Geneva, now a vibrant fusion of technology and nature. The buildings sang with energy, actual hums of harmony that vibrated softly in his bones. Earth had become aware, responsive. Cities repaired themselves. Food grew from solar channels. The weather bent to emotional balance, not just pressure systems. But the sky no longer obeyed. It shimmered like a curtain being pulled back. And then it split. A thin, precise tear opened above Earth's atmosphere. Not natural, not orbital. A surgical breach into space-time itself. No ships passed through, no messages. Just a presence. Watching. By noon, 3 of the newly awakened cities fell silent. Not attacked, not bombed, just still. No movement, no breath. People frozen mid-laughter. Birds still in mid-air. Fountains suspended like glass. Ryland received the alert just before the 4th city blinked out. And this time, he saw it. A Council arc shade, a weapon that was rumored to exist only in theory, descended from the sky. It wasn't a ship. It was a shadow. A void in the shape of a blade, slicing across the clouds, erasing everything beneath it with a hum so low it vibrated at the edge of thought. Not sound. Memory. They weren't just destroying Earth's cities. They were erasing them from time. In the command hall, the new Earth Nexus, Ryland met with Shar and Nere and the rest of his surviving Corps officers. The city shook from the afterpulse of the Arcshade's second sweep. They're not invading, Nera said, pale. They're correcting. Shar growled. They think we're a mistake. They were waiting, Ryland muttered. We awakened Earth, and they saw it as a threat to their reality. Not just politically, existentially. A silence fell over the room. Then Ryland turned to the Nexus core, a glowing sphere that was Earth's living pulse, now linked directly to him, since he had stabilized the anchor. I need access, he said, to all timelines, every version of myself that survived the loops. Bring them to me. The core hesitated, then spoke in a voice both feminine and ancient. There is risk. Too many echoes cause fusion decay. Do it, Ryland said. We're not fighting a war anymore. We're fighting erasure. The process was agony. He lay in the central chamber, heart linked to the core, mind flayed open to possibility. One by one they arrived. The other Rylands, not memories, not recordings, living versions. One walked in with a scar across half his face and wore tattered armor scavenged from a council dreadnought. Another limped with a cane, but his eyes were bright with madness. A third looked like Ryland had 30 years ago, young, bitter, and already tired of losing. They gathered around him like reflections in a broken mirror. I fought them for decades, the scarred one said. We lasted 20 years beyond the fall, built a new Earth on the bones of Saturn. Then they found us. They always find us, the old one said, coughing into a handkerchief that came back red. But this is the closest we've ever come to a stabilized Earth, said the younger Ryland, pacing like a trapped wolf. You anchored the soul of the planet. You made it a mind. Ryland stood. I didn't make anything. I just stopped running. The younger version spat. Then you're going to die with dignity, that it? No, Ryland said calmly. I'm going to fight with purpose. He pointed to the core, which pulsed harder now, flickering through visions of the arc-shade in orbit. They're afraid of us. That's why they brought that thing. The Omega filament, the older Ryland whispered. The one they said they'd never use. The scarred one growled. It doesn't destroy. It rewrites, unravels us from history, so we never existed. Shar stepped forward. Then we strike first. With what? Nera snapped. We've got no fleet, barely any defense systems, and Earth is still stabilizing. Ryland turned to the core. We don't need weapons. He tapped his temple. We are the weapon. The plan was mad, beyond reckless, but madness had always been part of Earth's survival. The core used the genetic imprint of the Rylands, each from a timeline where humanity had resisted differently, to tap into the reality seams where Earth had still almost won. Not through war, but through collapse. Ryland's idea wasn't to fight the Omega filament head-on. It was to trigger simultaneous collapses in every parallel Earth timeline where the Council had failed, to overload the Council's dimensional projection system, force them into containment mode, and shut down the weapon before it could finish unraveling Earth's memory field. But to do that, they needed to fuse. The Rylands had to become one, a single voice of Earth, a unified echo. The core opened the fusion chamber. One by one, the other Rylands entered, flesh turning to energy, memory flowing into the central matrix. The young Ryland fought it. I don't want to lose who I am. You won't, Ryland said. You'll become more. The last to fuse was the scarred one. He nodded once. End this. And then Ryland stood alone again, but different. He was taller, stronger. His voice echoed with multiple tones, his thoughts layered like chords in a symphony. He was prime Ryland now, not a version, the center, the Omega filament activated. From space, it looked like a spiral of black silk stretching across the solar system. Every second, it erased years from existence. A city here, a mountain there, a generation, a language, a mother holding her child, a soldier dying on Mars. All gone. But Earth stood firm, the sky pulsed, the ground vibrated, and Prime Ryland stepped onto the global projection field, a satellite system now merged with Earth's neural grid, and spoke. "Council, I know you can hear me." The sky above twisted, a face formed from light. The Council Chancellor, a being now half data, half spirit, twisted by centuries of self-preservation. "You were never meant to survive." "I know," Ryland replied, "but we did." "You are poison, number-were consequence. Then die with purpose." The Omega filament shifted, a final strike prepared. Ryland closed his eyes and released the collapse. Simultaneously, in thousands of parallel Earths, the ones the core had mapped, war ignited. Not between humans and aliens, but between existence and memory. Each Earth, now connected through Ryland's fused mind, triggered its own decay spiral. But instead of destroying each other, they looped. One Earth's end became another's beginning. The timelines tangled, overloaded, and the Council's system, never designed for recursive paradox, crashed. The Omega filament spasmed, its energy turned inward, and in one final flash, it was gone. Silence. Then, breath. Air filled Ryland's lungs like fire. He dropped to his knees, shaking, the fusion beginning to pull him apart, multiple selves fraying under the weight of maintaining collapsed timelines. But Earth held him. He looked up. The Council's face was gone. The sky was clean. Above him the stars blinked, not out of fear, but acknowledgement. He had done it. For now. He didn't remember collapsing, or the way his limbs seized, but he remembered the silence after the end, deeper than death, heavier than peace. The moment the Omega filament imploded, the world had stilled. The spiral weapon had unraveled itself, collapsing into a sliver of dying light, like a black star gasping one last breath. And when it faded, the sky returned, clear, unmarred, blue. But Ryland wasn't there to see it. He lay unconscious for 3 days, cradled in Earth's nexus chamber beneath the surface of the New Geneva. He wasn't alone, not really. The core watched over him, pulsing softly like a heartbeat just beneath the floor, linked directly into his mind, holding together the fusion of the Ryland Prime. But something was changing. The core noticed it first, and it whispered into his mind as he slept. "You are unspooling. Each self is trying to reclaim its name. You are fragmenting." He dreamed of conversations with other versions of himself. Some argued, some wept. One tried to kill him. "Let me go," shouted the young Ryland, the one who hadn't seen the horrors of the loops. "You don't get to be me," snarled the scarred one. "I earned this skin." And then, the oldest one, broken, thin, but wise, sat down beside him in the dream and said, "You can't carry us all forever." That's when he woke up. Shar and Nere were beside him, their eyes lit with relief, but also fear. His skin had paled to an unnatural tone, and strange symbols flickered faintly beneath the surface. Not tattoos, not scars, data, code, history. "How long was I out?" Ryland asked, his voice rough, layered in tones that didn't belong. 3 days, Nere said. "And you've been shifting." He sat up. The motion made his body spasm slightly, as if his own muscles were fighting against themselves. Shar handed him a small recording. "From the core. It said you'd want to see this." Ryland pressed play. A projection filled the air, not an image, but an invitation. The voice of Earth. "Ryland, the fusion cannot hold. Your mind is fracturing under the weight of echoes. You have stabilized reality, but your own will is dissolving. You have 2 paths. Die as a man, let another lead, or become the guardian. Not Ryland, Not human, not one. You will become the soul of Earth, bound, eternal, forgotten by history, but remembered by the planet. Decide before the fractures consume you." The message ended. Ryland didn't speak. Later that night, Ryland walked the streets of Geneva alone. It was warm now, summer in the New World. Children played on floating platforms. Food stalls buzzed again. For a moment, the war seemed like another lifetime, another loop. But in every reflection, every window, every puddle, Ryland saw himself, not once, but dozens of times. A flicker of his younger self, shoulders squared, angry and righteous. A brief image of the Ryland who had fused with alien tech, his skin silver and eyes glassy. Another of the broken one, muttering to himself and bleeding from his palms. They followed him, like ghosts of decisions made and unmade. He stumbled near a fountain and dropped to his knees. "Why me?" he whispered. The core responded instantly, its voice echoing from the city's grid. "Because you chose to return. All others ran, all others surrendered. You came back, that makes you the seed." Ryland stood slowly. "I'm not afraid to die." "We know. That is why you must decide, while you still can. You have one more sunrise." The next morning, he stood in the Nexus chamber again. Shar and Neri stood behind him, quiet. Neither tried to sway him. The chamber had changed. Where once the core had pulsed with a neutral white light, it now glowed deep gold, almost alive. It responded to him now, the first human to touch Earth's soul, and not be obliterated by it. He stepped onto the platform. A pillar rose from the floor. At its tip, a device forged from old council alloy, fused with Earth Tech, the choice engine, built by the core, made for one use, two sides, one button marked Remember, one button marked Forget. Ryland stared at them both. "Tell me what happens if I remember," he asked the core. "You will ascend, become the guardian of Earth, a soul without flesh, no memory of self, no voice, but your presence will guide this world forever. The loops will never return. Earth will be safe, but you will be gone." He nodded. "And if I forget?" "You will wake in a new body, human, free. The fusion will unravel. You will not remember the war, or the council, or the loops. But you will grow old. You will die. And someone else must carry the burden when the next cycle comes." Neri stepped forward. "Sir, Ryland, I can carry it. You've done enough." Shar added, "We can train others. Earth doesn't need a god. It needs a man who believes." Ryland turned toward them, and they saw something shift in his eyes. A flicker of finality. He smiled. "You don't understand. It was never about being the hero. It was about not letting the wrong man win." He placed a hand over the Remember button, paused, then looked over his shoulder one last time. "Thank you," he said to them both, "for being my tether." And then pressed it. The core erupted. A golden pulse spread through the chamber, then through the city, then across the planet. Every tree bent toward the center. Every bird stopped mid-flight. The oceans stilled. The atmosphere held its breath. Ryland rose into the air, his body glowing, limbs stretched wide. Light poured from his mouth, his eyes, his chest. Not burning, but transcending. The other Ryland screamed through him. Their voices echoed across reality as they were pulled inward, compressed into a single point of consciousness. Time cracked, reality blinked, and then silence. He was gone. No one said anything for an hour. Nir fell to her knees. Shar turned away, fists clenched so tight his knuckles bled. The core pulsed once more, then said softly, "He is within us now. Earth has chosen its guardian, and the loops will never return." In the years that followed, Earth became something more than a world. It became a beacon, a place where no race, no species, no being was unwelcome. Ships from forgotten galaxies came not to conquer, but to learn. The core opened portals to peaceful timelines. Wars ended not by force, but by reflection. And above it all, high in orbit, the stars shimmered slightly different near Earth, as if something watched. Sometimes late at night, Shar would walk through the forests near Geneva and sit under the tree Ryland once loved as a boy, and the wind would whisper his name. And he'd whisper back, "You did it. You made it count." The new Earth wasn't called Earth anymore. The name was too small for what it had become. They called it Origin now, not because it was where humanity began, but because it was where everything began again. The scars of war, the shadow of the council, the broken bones of old cities, all of it had faded beneath forests of light, oceans that pulsed with memory, and sky bridges that sang when you crossed them. The world had healed, but it had never forgotten. The core still pulsed at the heart of Geneva, the golden sphere now enclosed in a crystalline chamber, guarded not by soldiers, but by pilgrims, people who didn't carry guns, but questions, people who came from the farthest corners of the galaxy, seeking not sanctuary, but understanding, because somewhere in that core, they believed, was him, the guardian, Ryland. Nera stood on the cliffside overlooking the city, her gray braid flickering in the wind. She wore no uniform anymore, just robes of light thread fabric, woven from Earth's own living fibers. She came here every year, on the same day, the day of ascent, the day Ryland made the choice no one else could. She touched the small stone at her chest, his old unit tag, the last thing he gave her before he pressed the remember button. It was warm. It always was. Some said it was a property of the metal. She knew better. Behind her, children gathered, whispering. "Is it true?" one asked. "That he talks to people sometimes?" Another added, "My uncle said the rivers glow when you say his name." Nere smiled softly but didn't turn. "Do you believe he's still alive?" a small voice asked beside her. She finally looked down. A boy, no older than 9, eyes wide, hands trembling as if the very question was too heavy for him to carry. She crouched. "I don't believe he's alive," she said softly, "because that word doesn't mean what it used to. Ryland is here, not as a man, not in a body, but in everything that breathes on this world." The boy frowned. "But how can someone live without a face?" Nere pointed at the sky. "You don't need a face to light up the stars." Far above Origin, the satellites that once belonged to defense grids had become observation temples. No weapons, just lenses, eyes into the past and future. From one such station, Shar stood at the window, watching the planetary tides shift with gravity pulses. He was old now, not weak, but slower. His once broad shoulders had thinned. His eyes, though, were sharp as ever. Beside him stood Elia, the new Prime Minister of Origin. "He'd never have allowed us to fall into bureaucracy," Shar muttered. Elia chuckled. "He didn't exactly leave us a democracy either." "No," Shar said. "He left us a mirror, one we're still afraid to look into." Elia turned serious. "They want to name the new starport after him, but the core denied it." Shar nodded. "Of course it did. Why?" "Because Ryland doesn't want to be remembered as a monument," Shar said. "He wants to be felt, not worshipped, not weaponized." Elia walked to the console. "But people need heroes, names, symbols." Shar's voice hardened. "That's what started the loops in the first place." She didn't press further. Deep in the core chamber, the pulse of Origin beat steadily. It had grown quieter over the years, not weaker, but calmer, less erratic, less emotional. Some said it was Earth stabilizing, Others said it was Ryland learning to sleep. Still, once in a while, when the world was too still, when grief slipped back into the wind, the core would flare, and whispers would echo through the trees. Most dismissed them. But not the woman called Leah. She was a musician, a composer who lived near the northern ridges, where the air was thin and the auroras bled into the clouds. She'd never fought in any war, never trained in any academy. But one morning, she heard a song in her sleep, a melody too complex for human hands, notes that looped and shifted in impossible ways. She woke and played it, by instinct. The moment she did, her piano caught fire. Not flame, memory. The room filled with images she didn't recognize. Soldiers dying, towers collapsing, 1,000 Rylands screaming into time. And at the center of it, a single voice. "Don't let them forget why we broke." Leah collapsed. She woke 2 days later, and from that day on, she never stopped playing. Her music spread across the planet. No lyrics, no explanation, just sound. But when she played, the skies shimmered. And somewhere deep within the core, something pulsed in time with her rhythm. 50 years passed. Nera died at peace, her final words whispered to the wind. He waited long enough. Now let him rest. Shar followed 5 years later, buried beneath the tree where Ryland once stood. No military honors, just a single inscription. He believed in the man who returned. The council? They never came back. Some believed they collapsed under the weight of their own erasures. Others said they fled into a sealed dimension, terrified of a world that had once been forgotten. No one really cared anymore, because the future wasn't about them. It was about origin, and those who lived there. One day, a young girl named Ayla found an old journal buried beneath the roots of the Nexus tree. It was sealed in alloy, untouched by time. The cover bore a name long erased from public records. Ryland. Inside were only 3 entries. Entry 1. If someone's reading this, I guess I didn't quite vanish. I'm not sure what I've become. A whisper, a wind, maybe Earth itself, but I remember. That means I still exist. Entry 2. The core dreams now. It didn't used to. I see colors that don't exist. I see choices unmade, people who never were. Sometimes I forget who I am. But then I hear them, laughing, living, not looping. Entry 3. I made the right choice. Ayla brought the journal to her mother. They didn't show it to the government, or the core. They kept it, read it, reread it, and passed it down. Not as a sacred text, but as a reminder that once a man made a decision no one else could, and because he did, the stars stayed lit. Final words. No statues were built, no holidays declared, no one ever said his full name again in ceremony. But across Origin, when storms rolled in and the air grew tense, people would place a hand to the ground and whisper one word: Ryland. And the wind always whispered back,